Alright, hold on. My name is Twister7, and today I have a video for you guys. Today, I will be making a tier list for Trials of Mana Remake. I've been playing this game for the past 2 weeks, and I decided to do a tier list to help newer players. If you're wondering, I spent over 200 hours playing the original, and I spent almost 100 hours into the remake, so I'm really passionate about this game. I love it a lot. So before we get started, I need to set some ground rules. So one, no tier 4 characters. Tier 4 is basically when the characters are at their best, like the final class. I won't be including that because it's really not that important and it's only for the post game. Second, this is for hard mode only, so not easy, not normal, not beginner. This is for hard mode, so if you're wondering why a character might be lower than they might seem, that's probably because they didn't perform as well on hard mode. And then third, this is all based on like combat or performance. So some characters don't have skills that are meant for combat, so they'll probably be much lower on the tier list. And the final rule is that this is my opinion. If you do not agree with some of the placements on this tier list, that is fine. Just comment down below. I really would like to see a lot of feedback or comments in this section below because I think this tier list is accurate in my opinion, but I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Also, I spent like the past 2 weeks working on this tier list, like playing with every character, every class, resetting the game. It has been a lot, so I'd appreciate if you guys like and subscribe to this channel. It'd really help out a lot. So yeah, let's get started. All right, so let's talk about tier placements. We have D, C, B, A plus, and S tier. D tier means the characters are really, really bad. They have no good skills, no good combat. They're just outshined and outclassed by other characters, and they probably shouldn't be used. But the one thing I will say about the characters in this game is that I think you can use any character to a certain extent. I don't think everyone's necessarily bad, and it's just up to personal preference. The characters in D tier just aren't good. They really aren't that good. C tier is slightly better than D tier, a little bit more niche, but they have their ups and downs. B tier is pretty good. These characters are good in combat, but they have notable flaws, but they're still good. You can use them. And then A tier means these characters are just good. Like you can use them. They really don't have any flaws. A plus means that the character has something like broken about them. So when I get to A plus, you'll start to notice this, like the character power creep just gets a little bit insane. And S tier means the characters can literally fit on any team. They are just like ridiculous in combat. They have broken ability, broken support, or they just stand out so much when compared to all the other characters. All right, so to no one's surprise, we have the worst class in the game, Paladin. This class is Duran's light path. It really is the worst class in the game, but it does have some good skills. The reason why this class is so bad is because it makes Duran, who is a physical unit, focus on healing, and he loses a lot of attack when compared to his dark path, which has more attack since they're more offensive. But he does have some skills, so I'll talk about those. For locked abilities, he gets Barret, which increases his defense by 10% for 10 seconds at the start of battle. He also gets Protective Light, which decreases light and dark damage by 10%. For class strikes, he gets Triple Slash, which is actually pretty good. It's a single hit move. It stuns enemies, stuns bosses. You're going to hear me say this a lot, but any single hit move that can stun an enemy or a boss is really good because it allows your teammates to rack up more damage on them. And he also gets Glint Slash, which is like a big explosion. It's a multi-hit move. It hits multiple targets. But it's very inaccurate and you can miss with it. It's still pretty good because Duran really doesn't have any way of hitting multiple enemies at once. He really does not have any skills. For moves, he only gets Healing Light and Holy Saber. Like that's literally it. And the problem with those moves is that the character Charlotte, like at base, or like when she gets her first promotion, not her second promotion, she already has Healing Light Plus. Duran does not get Healing Light Plus, or Paladin does not get Healing Light Plus. He only gets Healing Light, which means he can only heal one enemy at a time, or one ally at a time, which is really, really bad. Because since he's a character that focuses so much on combat, he really just has to, like, if he needs to heal someone, he just has to like stray away from doing combat, and it really hurts his character a lot. And other skill he gets is Holy Saber. Now this is actually kind of good, but another thing, this is another skill that Charlotte gets, and another problem with this is that even though there are so many like dark enemies at the end of the game, Holy Saber isn't necessarily like needed because you'll be doing so much damage to the enemies that it just won't matter. So it's kind of bad. Now for abilities or like skills that he gets Charger, which increases charge attack damage by 75%. And he also gets Cure, which has a 75% chance to cancel status effects when using healing magic. Now for these skills and abilities, I only listed the most notable ones that the character gets. And for Duran, like that's literally all he gets. He only gets those two skills like when he promotes. So you really don't want to use his class. Next we have Liege, which is Duran's light dark path. It's slightly better than Paladin, but it's pretty much just as bad because it's a light path for Duran, who's a character that focuses so much on combat. But the reason why this class is actually better than Paladin is because its healing is actually good, which is I can't even believe I'm saying that. His healing is actually good. But let's just talk about his skills and what he gets to make this class much better than Paladin. So first he gets Barret, which is a pretty good skill. It increases defense by 10% for 10 seconds at the start of battle. That's pretty good. Duran has the highest defense, so he has highest defense in the game, so that's pretty good. He also gets Sanctum, which has a 20% chance to increase healing and magic effectiveness by 100% in battle, which basically means you get healed fully whenever he uses a healing skill, which is pretty good. Now, the problem with this class is, like Paladin, he gets skills that Charlotte learns at base. Like, as soon as she promotes for her first promotion, she already has Healing Light Plus and Twinkle Rain, which are skills that this class actually gets. He gets Healing Light Plus, which Paladin does not, which makes him a better healer. And he also gets Twinkle Rain, but he does not get Twinkle Rain Plus, which basically it's a very small thing, but he can't remove all statuses from his entire team at once. So you'll probably have to use like a is it called a Marmpoto oil, something like that, some item that does that. Now for class strikes, he gets Triple Slash, which is pretty good. Paladin also gets that. He also gets Magic Rend. Now both of these skills are actually pretty good. They stun bosses. They do a lot of damage, but he doesn't get any multi-hit class strikes, which kind of hurts his character. So pretty much his combat is worse than Paladin's, but his healing is better, which makes him a better character. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but yeah, that's the only reason why I use Liege over Paladin. Now for like skills and abilities, he gets attack boost all, defense boost all, and magic boost all. Now these are all really, really good. I think the only other characters that get this are like, I want to say Starlancer and Rogue. A few other characters get the skills, but these are pretty good. They basically buff your team whenever a battle starts. It's really good. Just having these skills on your character is fine. And he also gets Charger, which increases charge attack damage by 75%. And that's literally it for like skills and abilities. I did not find the other notable skills that this class gets. His combat is definitely much worse than Paladin, but his healing is better, so he's slightly better than Paladin, but he's just pretty much just as bad. Now, there is one more thing. I said this with Paladin. He also gets shields. Shields aren't that important for this character. He has so much defense that he literally does not need to have that item on him. And you can literally use any other class. But the reason why this class is just slightly better than Paladin is his healing utility in combat is actually kind of good, but it's still a really bad class. Next is Rogue, and this is Hawkeye's Light Dark Path. This class is in D tier for one reason. It has really low attack power. I know someone's going to say that this class does get some, like, a few good skills, but that doesn't really justify his combat. Now, he does have a few good skills, but the first notable thing about this character is that he has no locked abilities for combat. So I'm literally rating characters how good they are in combat, and this character does not have a single skill that helps him during combat. I think he gets a skill that like doubles the item frequency that he gets at the end of the battle, and like adds a 10% chance of like increasing an item's chance of like appearing. That's kind of good, but it's not for combat because you'll find so much of like items are so plentiful because if you fight a lot of enemies, you'll just find a lot of an item. Now for class strikes, he gets Swallow Throw. This is a multi-hit, like he throws like a whole bunch of knives. It's actually kind of good. It's pretty good, I guess. And then he gets Slash Fury. This is a single hit move, I'm pretty sure, and I think it just does a lot of damage. It's a good skill, but it's really doesn't help that he has low attack power. He focuses on traps, and traps are they're alright in this game. They can miss, which I don't like. He gets Trap CS boost, which means every time he gets a trap successfully, or whenever he uses a trap, he gets 25% adds to CS gauge. That's pretty good. He gets Super Trap Increase, which increases trap damage by 25%. And then he also gets Toxic Trap, which has a 30% chance to poison enemies when the trap is successful. Even though he comes with the skill Toxic, which, I mean, Hawkeye literally comes with the skills Toxic that lets him poison any enemy that he touches, or has like a 30% chance, which is kind of overkill, but at that point you really don't need that. So just overall, this class is just weak. Now, I know someone's going to say, oh, but this class has Grumpkin. Grumpkin is a broken move. Grumpkin is a broken move. It is a broken move. I'm not gonna lie. It is pretty ridiculous. It does a lot of damage. But first of all, it can be near the end of the game. There are enemies that can absorb wood damage since it's wood damage, so it's easy to absorb. It does heal him, or not heal him. It gives him MP back, so you can just spam his skill, which is pretty good. But that's literally it. That's literally the only notable skill that this class has. I think he gets like the I can't think of the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher and the axe that does like dark damage. It's really weird, but Grumpkin is literally the only good move that this character has. And overall, his combat is just not that good. It really sucks because this is a light dark path, and I do think it's interesting. Probably could do like a speed run with this class, but overall, this class is just very weak. And for the last class in D tier, we have Archmage. This is Angela's light dark path. The reason why this class is in D tier is because it's very weak and it tries to focus on hitting multiple enemies, but it does have a few good skills. For locked abilities, this class gets Magic Burst, which increases magic damage by 15% when MP is full. So basically, when you have full MP, your damage, you do more damage in combat. Now, you can actually stack this with the skill Obsidian Power, which you get from beating the Black Rabbite. It's like a hidden boss in the game. It's very strong too, but once you beat it, you get the Obsidian Power, and basically what that does is it makes all your moves in combat cost 0 MP. So you can literally just spam all of Angela's moves. It should always be on Angela. I think Reese and Hawkeye can use it, but it's really, really good on her. And it definitely helps this class a lot overall. For class strike, she has Love Typhoon and Dancing Wand. Love Typhoon is a weird class strike because it's very slow, but it can stun enemies. It's her level 2 class strike. It's okay. For a level 3 class strike, she gets Dancing Wand. Now this is just like probably the worst class strike in the game. It's very slow and it doesn't even do a lot of damage because I think it focuses on her like attack stat, which is very low. She has like the lowest attack in the game, so it's really not good for Angela or Archmage overall. Now for moves, so one thing about Angela's classes is that they each get a specific move. I think I want to say Magus gets like Ancient Curse, and I want to say Rune Seer gets like an insta kill move, which is not really that good, but this one gets Glitter Dust. It does 500 damage, but you won't believe that because this move just does not do a lot of damage. She makes like these circles, and it just circles the enemy, and it just hits them for a lot of damage, but for some reason it just does not kill. It's just not a really good move, even though it has 500 damage, so I'd avoid using it. And also, it takes a very long time for her to actually like cast a spell, so if you're going to use this skill, you might want to use that at distance, or you should just use just another class overall. Now, like skills and abilities, she gets access to all the elemental moves, so she gets like Fireball, Thunderstorm. This makes her a very good boss killer. Just having all these moves, or just in general, Angela's classes focus on having all the elemental moves. This class focuses on hitting multiple enemies with those, so it's kind of good, but she's just so weak that it really won't matter. For skills, she gets Judge, which deals more damage to boss enemies. Or boss monsters by 20%. This is really, really good because it makes her a great boss killer. I think she might be the only character that actually gets this skill, which is kind of weird, but it does fix her low attack power when she's fighting a boss, so it's kind of good. She also gets Elemental Combo. Now this is a really good skill that all of Angela's classes gets. So basically, the more you use a skill like Fireball Plus or Thunderstorm, the more you use it in succession, the stronger it gets. So if you spam the skill over and over again, it will get stronger, and eventually it'll just get to the point where it'll just kill the enemy. I think it increased it by like 30%. It's like the max, but it's a really good skill. And for her last skill, she gets Pinpoint. This increases the chance of critical hits by 25%. This is good for her because she just does not have a high attack power. She's very weak, and she really needs to deal as much damage as she possibly can. Angela's best classes are the ones that deal the most damage, and this one kind of struggles at that, which is why it's in D tier. It's just not that good. So overall, this class is just very weak. It's a very big letdown because I like this class. I think it has a cool design, but in combat, it's just really, really bad overall. Alright, starting off in C tier, we have Rune Seer. This is Angela's Dark Light path. This is a decent class that focuses on status and has a little bit more power than Archmage, but it's still fairly weak. For locked ability, she gets Wrath, which increases magic stats when the ally faints, and she also gets Guardian Runes, which increases status effect resistance by 30%. Wrath just increases your power when an ally dies. You can constantly revive an ally in battle, so this is really good. And Guardian Runes basically makes it so that it's harder for your enemy to inflict status, but there's an item called I think it's the Mana Ring or the Mana Bracelet that basically negates all status, so this skill is okay, but it's still good to have. For class strike, she gets Pummel Star. This is a weak class strike. You should not use it. It can miss the opponent. It doesn't do a lot of damage. I would avoid using it. But for her other class strike, she gets Ton Shatter. Now, this is actually pretty good. She throws like a huge mass or ton in the air, and it deals a lot of damage to the enemies. It can also miss, but it has a lot more range, and it's actually really good, so I'd recommend using that. Definitely helps her take out more enemies than she would be able to normally. She also gets access to all the stronger elemental moves. Archmage only got access to like the plus versions, but this one gets stronger elemental moves. She gets Cold Blaze, Blaze Wall. I think there's like I think it's Dust Cloud or something like that. But they're all really good because they have 350 power base, and they also have a chance of inflicting status. So these are all really good to have on her. Now for abilities and skills, she gets Cheat, which increases damage to lower level monsters by 20%. This is kind of overkill because she's going to be doing a lot of damage, but it is good to have. If I were to have these skills, I'd rather have them for like bosses specifically. I know Archmage had that one skill that let her do more damage to bosses, but this definitely does help this character out overall. She does have low attack power, so she needs this. She also gets total resistance, which cancels out all status effects, so this is pretty good. You won't be getting hit with a status at all. The Mana Ring and the Mana Bracelet also does this, but this is also good to have on her. She also gets Wound Magic and Special Effect, which basically just increases her damage output overall. And then for her last ability that I found notable, she gets Effect Boost All, which increases the chance of status effects for all allies by 30%. So this is actually pretty crazy. Basically, if you have a move that has a chance of inflicting status or extra effect or dealing more damage, it is most likely to happen if she has this skill equipped. It's really good. Definitely makes her more of a support character overall. It really helps this class out. Now, the reason why this class is in C tier, it's just very weak. It's outshined by Grand Diviner and Magus. Those two classes in particular just have so much attack power when compared to Archmage and Rune Seer. But this class does have a little bit of a niche. That's why it's in C tier, but it can definitely be used, just not as good as the other two classes. Next, we have Warrior Monk, and this is Kevin's Light Dark path. This is by far Kevin's worst path because it tries too hard to focus on healing and strays away from combat. Kevin has the highest attack in the game. His dark paths definitely have higher attack than his light paths because they're more aggressive, but this one tries to focus on healing. It's not necessarily bad, but it's kind of niche, and it's just outclassed by this class and a few other classes or a few other characters. But it does have a few good skills. For locked abilities, he gets Indignant. It increases his attack if an ally faints. That's self-explanatory. If an ally dies, you get stronger. You can revive your allies, and you can repeat the process. Makes his character very aggressive. If he ever like needs more attack, he can just let his ally die. He also gets Ambition, which cancels status effects and stat decrease when using a class strike. This is pretty good. You really won't notice debuffs in the game. There are like few enemies that actually have the skills that debuff, but there are a few moves that can. So if you use a class strike with this character, you will just get rid of all debuffs on your character, which is pretty good. Now for class strikes, he has Spin Kick. This is a really, really good class strike. He just kicks like a huge tornado, does a lot of damage, hits multiple enemies. It's really good. And he also gets Genbu Kick as his level 3 class strike. Now this is a single hit class strike. It stuns enemies or one enemy, and he just kind of like combos them. He does like a whole bunch of punches and kicks, and they'll just die. This is pretty good for bosses. Any single hit class strike that stuns or does a lot of damage to an enemy or a boss is really good. Now for moves and skills, he gets Healing Light Plus and Pressure Point, and he also gets Leaf Saber. Now Healing Light Plus is really good, but there's just one problem. There's a character named Charlotte. This is the same problem with Paladin and Leech, but Charlotte at base, as soon as she promotes, she gets Healing Light Plus, which heals the entire team because she literally focuses on healing. So this class is already like outclassed by Charlotte when it comes to healing, but he does have a little bit more better combat. It's kind of weird, but his healing is okay. He also gets Pressure Point. Now this increases your attack whenever you use it. It's basically a buff. It's kind of good. I think it's actually really good, but this class really needs it because his attack is so low. And then for his last move, he gets Leaf Saber. Basically, every hit you have when you have Leaf Saber activated, you get more MP for your moves. This is pretty good if you run out of MP or you think you're about to, but near the end of the game, you'll have so much MP that this will never be a problem. Now for skills and abilities, he gets Attack Saber. Now this is really good. Gets a 25% damage increase for the cost of more MP for Saber skills. Like I said earlier, you'll have so much MP by the end of the game that this will never be a problem. So it's just 25% damage increase. And then for the other notable skill or ability that he has Broken Lines. Now all of Kevin's classes have this, but basically what this does is it grants a 60% chance of decreasing the enemy's defense when they are hit by a critical. So Kevin's all about, well, he doesn't get a lot of crits, but some of his moves can actually inflict or have criticals on them, which allows them to do more damage. But basically, if you crit an enemy or opponent, you'll be doing more damage, and there's a chance that their defense will decrease, which makes you do more damage. This really helps this class in particular. He has a very low attack, and that's why he's in C tier. He has the lowest attack out of all of Kevin's classes, which is kind of weird. It's the Light Dark path, but it's okay. It's just outclassed by all of Kevin's other classes. Next is Warlock, and this is Charlotte's Dark Path. This class isn't bad because it still has access to all of Charlotte's healing and support skills, but it tries too hard to use offensive magic. Basically, if you want an offensive magic user, just use Angela. But this class does have a few good skills. For locked abilities, it gets Distress, which increases attack and magic attack by 10% when hit by a status. So if you're like Poison or your Sleep or any status that you have on your character, you'll be dealing more damage with Charlotte. This is pretty good. This class focuses on just dealing as much damage as possible. Physical stat really isn't that high, but it does have the highest attack stat out of all of Charlotte's classes. And then for other locked abilities, she gets Life Swap, which recovers 15% of HP when using a class strike. This is pretty good. That means every time you use a class strike, you will get 15% of your HP back. This is really good for this character because this character kind of focuses on using class strikes every now and then. Her level 3 class strike isn't that good, but her level 2 class strike is Dash, which makes her she dashes across the screen, hits multiple enemies. It's really good. But the main way you're going to be doing damage with this class is with her summons. So like all of Charlotte's other classes, she has access to Healing Light Plus, which means she can just heal her whole entire team for like full HP for like the cost of 5 MP. It's really, really broken. She doesn't get Twinkle Rain Plus. Twinkle Rain Plus basically means you can do the same, but instead of healing your whole entire team, you heal their status, which is this class is the only class Charlotte has that does not get this. So it's kind of a letdown, but this class focuses on summons. Now, I personally don't like summons. Summons are basically you just make an enemy or make an ally appear, and they do damage to an enemy. Some summons are stronger than others, obviously. Her strongest summon is Demon. It has like 350 damage, I think. Just summon a Demon, it does a lot of damage. Now, summons are actually pretty good for like breaking shields for some enemies if they're too hard to take out. But she's like the only character, or this is one of the only characters in the game that actually has access to summons. I really wouldn't recommend it because if I want an offensive magic user on my team, I just use Angela. And summons also take a while for her to summon, but they are really strong. So it just depends on your playstyle. For moves, she gets Demon, which I just mentioned earlier, but she also gets Fatigued Breath. Now, Fatigued Breath, I'm pretty sure this is the only class that gets a skill, but basically she like spits out this red or purple fire, and it decreases all the enemy's magical stats. This is really good for bosses. If a boss is doing way too much damage and you hit them with this, they'll start doing like literally no damage. It really makes her a good like debuffer. And what's interesting about this class is even though it's a dark path, it focuses so much on support. So for example, for like skills and abilities, she gets access to attack down, defense down, and magic defense down, all which is basically all these skills do is they debuff all the enemies that you're fighting. So basically with all these skills, when you start a battle, their attack, defense, and magic defense will all be decreased, which means your team is doing more damage. So this really makes her a really good support character. There's a reason why she's in C tier. Like I said earlier, if you want a magic user or offensive magic user, just use Angela, use Grand Diviner or Magus. Those classes have so much attack power that this class gets outshined. But if you want a little bit more balance, I'd recommend this class. Now, there is one other thing. After this class is obviously Necromancer. I put these classes next to each other for a reason. Necromancer is slightly better, but the difference between Warlock and Necromancer is that Necromancer has more like healing capabilities and a little bit more like more niche debuffing skills, while Warlock just has a little bit more attack. Now this class does have the highest attack out of all 4 classes, and it can be used. There's a reason why it's in C tier. I think it's kind of niche. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a little bit outclassed by all of Charlotte's other classes. So next is Necromancer, and this is Charlotte's Starlight Path. It's very similar to Warlock. It incorporates healing, debuffing, and summoning magic. Personally, if I want an offensive magic user, I use Magus or Grand Diviner, and if I want a really good healer, I use High Cleric or Sage, but this class is actually not that bad. For locked abilities, it gets Repetition, which increases damage when using summoning magic constantly. This stacks up to 30%. So basically, if you use a summon with this class, you're going to be doing a lot more damage as time goes on. Warlock has a lot more power initially, but as time goes on, if you use multiple summons with this class, you'll be doing more damage. For class strike, she gets Dash. Warlock also gets Dash. Basically, you hit multiple enemies. It does a lot of damage. The level 3 class strike, I think for this class is, I want to say it's single hit, and I don't think it's that good, which is why I didn't list it here. But it's not really that important because you're going to be using summons and healing with this class for the most part. For moves, it gets access to Healing Light Plus and Twinkle Ring Plus. Warlock does not get access to Twinkle Rain Plus, and I know that might be small or seem small because there's an item that literally does that. It really does make a big difference, especially late game enemies, especially bosses. They can like, I know a great example. There's a light, I think it's called Light Gazer. It's one of the light bosses, or it's one of the Benevodons. And it has a move that I think Moogles your whole team. And if you don't know what a Moogle is, if you're Moogled, you cannot do anything unless you die. Since this character has access to healing or Twinkle Rain Plus, you can get rid of that status immediately, which makes this class really, really good. And for our other move that I listed that was notable, she gets access to Dark Curse. Now this is the only class that gets access to this skill, and basically what this does is it decreases all stats of one enemy. This is really, really good. It's pretty much broken. If you're fighting a boss and you just want to get rid of them as soon as possible, or they're doing too much damage or too much of anything, you just decrease all of their stats, and it is really, really insane. Just being able to do that, that debuffing capability is really weird because the only other character that debuffs in this game is like Reese's Dark Pass, and they can't even do that. So that's really good for this character. Now for skills and abilities, she gets access to Quick Shot. Warlock also gets access to this. Basically, you do 30% more damage when the enemy is full at HP. This class also gets access to Char, which has a 45% chance to burn enemies with the power attack. You won't be using power attacks with it. Well, you will be using attacks with this character, but for the most part, you're going to be summoning and using magic. And then for the last notable skill that I listed, gets access to Climactic Hit, which increases the chance of crit on the enemy by 70% when they have a status. Since Charred inflicts burn status, you can basically just have this for free, which means you have a 70% chance to inflict a crit on an enemy. Now, the reason why I put this class in C tier, I know it might seem a little bit controversial. It really tries to do too much for a Dark Light path. If you want an offensive magic user, you use Magus or Grand Diviner. That's just me personally, that's my playstyle. But you can definitely use this class, and if you want a really good healer, you use Sage or High Cleric. But this class is good. It's a little bit better than Warlock. I think Warlock has a little bit better support since it gets access to, attack, defense down. But this class is good. You can use it. It almost made it to B tier, but I don't think it's worth putting it in B tier because it's a little bit niche, but it is still a good class. Starting off B tier, we have Nomad, and this is Hawkeye's Light Path. Now, normally I wouldn't put a character like this in B tier. His combat really isn't good, but where he shines is his support. His support is really, really good. Compared to like a lot of characters, he's just so good at it that I just had to put him in B tier. For locked abilities, he gets Voltage, which adds a random stat increase to all allies when the battle starts. This is broken because basically when the battle starts, you just get a random stat increase for all your allies. So they can be attack, defense, your magic stacks. It can be anything. So this makes this character very, just really good support-wise. Even though it's unpredictable, you're getting a free buff when you start a battle, which is really good. For Class Strikes, you get Swallow Throw. This is the same as Rogue. You just hit multiple enemies with a whole bunch of knives. It's okay. I really don't like it, but this character isn't focused on combat since support is so good. And for his other Class Strike, he gets Dance of Roses. Now, this is a really good single-hit Class Strike. Hits one enemy and stuns them. It's good for bosses. Any single-hit Class Strike that does this is really good for bosses, so that makes him good for dealing with those type of enemies. And then for moves, the most notable ones I've listed were Poison Bubble, Crystalline, Nature Aura, and Moon Energy. He has a lot of moves for some reason. I don't know why. This is easily the most gimmicky character in the game. He has so many ways to debuff and break his enemies that it's just really, really fun and interesting. If you want to like experiment with the game, just see how much you can break it, I definitely use this class. And then for like abilities, he gets access to attack and defense boost all, which is pretty good. Not a lot of characters get these skills, but if you have these skills on your character, basically when the battle starts, I think it's 7% increase. It's either 7 or 10% increase when the battle starts. It's just good to have those buffs on your allies. And then for the other notable one I had was Pinpoint. Pinpoint increases your crit by 25%. Angela also gets that, but it's just good to have on him. And overall, this class is very, just really good support-wise. He's very gimmicky. I had to put him in B tier. B tier, basically, your characters have like, they don't really have flaws. They're just a little bit outclassed, but this character basically defines the tier. That's why he's at the bottom. But he really is a really good support character. If you want a good support character and you want a lot of gimmicks, I'd recommend using this class. Next is Ninja Master, and this is Hawkeye's Dark Path. It's very similar to Nightblade. Both classes are very offensive. This one specializes in taking out multiple enemies, which makes it so good. For locked abilities, it gets Focus, which increases attack by 10% when HP is full. This is easy. If you don't get hit, you're doing more damage, and if you do get hit, you just heal. So this is actually a pretty good locked ability. And for his other locked ability, he has Life and Death, which increases both attack stats by 10% when using the class strike for 30 seconds. He actually has pretty good class strikes, so if you just so happen to use one of them, you just get 10% in both of your attack stats, a 10% increase in both of your attacking stats, which is actually pretty good. For class strikes, the most notable one for this class is Shadow Menace. This, if you played the original, you know how broken this skill was. This skill was like insane, but they had to nerf it down a bit for the remake. Basically all this does is stuns one enemy and then it just does a lot of damage. It's really good for bosses. It is kind of weird that a single hit for one enemy. It may seem like it's kind of weak, but since his character focuses on hitting multiple enemies at once, it really isn't a problem. He also gets the plus version of all the ninja moves. So he gets like water diversion, dirt diversion, like the plus versions. And what's unique about those is that it allows him to target multiple enemies at once. If you played the original, the reason why this class was so good is because he could just hit multiple enemies anywhere on the screen. They always had to nerf that a bit, but he can still do that in this game, which makes him such a good class. For like abilities and skills, he gets Super Ninja Trick, which increases damage of ninja moves by 25%. A lot of people don't know what this means, but basically, if you use a ninja move, you get a 25% increase. And if you're wondering what a ninja move is, it's basically all the moves that he has. So like Shuriken, the diversion skills, basically all of those. He doesn't have a lot of moves, but he'll just get that free attack increase. He also gets Weak Point and Chain Ninja, which increases damage of ninja moves of specific elements when done in succession. This pretty much means that if you're like, this is really good for fighting bosses, but the more you use a specific skill or diversion skill, you're doing more damage to that specific enemy. And he also gets Ninja SP boost, which gives him a 7 MP recovery whenever he uses a ninja move. This is pretty good. This class overall is just very, very offensive. He specializes on hitting multiple enemies at once. I didn't put him in like higher tier because I don't think he's that notable. He really is just good. He doesn't have anything broken about him, but it is a really good class. And if you want to just finish multiple enemies off at once, I really recommend using this class. Next is Duelist, and this is Duran's Dark Path. This isn't Duran's worst class. It's really good. It's just not as good as Elderfray. For some reason, a lot of people think this class is trash, like the worst class in the game. It's really not. He has the second highest attack in the game. I think a lot of people forget that. But he does also have a few good abilities. For locked abilities, he gets Indomitable, which increases attack by 10% for 10 seconds when the battle starts. Basically, this class is just all about attacking. He has the second highest attack in the game, and he really shows that when he's on the battlefield. He just deals as much damage as he can to his opponents. He's kind of reckless, but he is a really good class. That's a really good skill for him to have. And for his other locked ability, he gets Adrenaline Rush, which increases attack after an enemy is defeated. So basically, if you beat an enemy, you get stronger over time. Now this is really, really good, especially if you're fighting a boss that summons like multiple enemies. If you take out those enemies, you're slowly getting stronger over time, and you'll start to realize that you're doing more damage to those bosses. He also has pretty good class strikes. He gets access to Spin Slash. Spin Slash is one of the most broken class strikes in the original. It makes no sense. It would hit everyone on screen, and it'll do like 300 damage. In this game, it's pretty much just as broken. Elderfray also gets this, but he makes a huge tornado, and it does ridiculous amounts of damage to the enemies. It's just so insane. You have to see how much damage this class can really do. And he also has Quakebringer. This isn't as good as Spin Slash, but it is actually it's somewhat good. So basically what he does is he makes like a line in front of him, and he like stabs the ground, and then he screams for some reason. It's easy to miss since there's a line in front of you, but it does a crazy amount of damage to enemies, whoever get like in front of you. So it's a really good class strike. You just have to be careful with it. He also gets access to many saber skills, so he gets access to like Ice Saber, Flame Saber, Thunder Saber. He gets access to all of those, so that makes him a pretty good boss killer. He also gets access to Dark Saber. Now, this isn't good in my opinion because there's so many dark enemies near the end of the game that you really don't need this, but it is still good to have. And then for like abilities, he gets Wound, which increases damage by 30% by sacrificing 5% of HP per power attack. This is actually a pretty good skill. So basically, every time you use a power attack with your character or with this character, you're sacrificing a bit of HP, but he will get stronger over time. It's a 30% attack increase each time he uses a power attack. So just think about that. This class really does have crazy attack. He's just very reckless about it. He also gets Rage, which increases damage every time 1/5 of his HP is lost in combat by 10% each. This is pretty much just as broken as Wound. Just as his character takes damage, he's slowly getting stronger over time. And trust me, you will be taking damage. And what's really good about this is that you can just heal him with like a character like Charlotte or any other character. You can heal him, bring him back to full, and he still have those buffs on him. So that makes his class really, really good. Just don't go crazy. He also has access to Fraction, which increases damage to enemies with moderate resistance by 150%. Yeah, that's right, 150%. Let that sink in. Elderfray also gets this. Basically what this means is if an enemy isn't like effective or weak against anything, or they're just taking normal damage, he's doing 150% more damage to them. That is literally overkill. And then he also gets access to Guard Saber, which increases enemies' elemental damage by 25%. This class is just reckless. It just does a lot of damage. It's B tier for a reason because it's so reckless to the point that there will be times where you notice that your HP is so low that you just have to heal. That's the only reason why it's in B tier, but it really is a good class. It's really not that bad. If you want a character just to see how much damage you can deal to an enemy, I'd recommend using this class. It's really good, and it's just slightly outclassed by Elderfray, but it still is a really good class. Next is Venatus, and this is Reese's Light Path. This class is outclassed by Starlancer, but it's still good thanks to focusing more on combat. For notable locked abilities, she gets access to Army of 1, which adds 1% to CS gauge per hit. This is really good. Basically, if you hit an enemy with a regular attack or a power attack, you get 1% added to your class strike per hit, per CS gauge. And basically what that does is it allows you to use more class strikes over time. And this class has really good class strikes. Her level 2 is Lance Surge. It's kind of mediocre, but it deals a lot of damage and it's really good at breaking enemy shields. But her level 3 is Light Lance. This is a really good class strike. Just does a ton of damage. She throws like one lance up and a whole bunch of lances come down. It's really good for taking out multiple enemies and it's ridiculously strong. Now for moves and abilities, she also gets access to all of the buffing skills. So she gets access to strength, protection, and mental boost. These are all really good. The problem with this is that Starlancer has access to these too, but she also gets access to the plus versions, which makes her that class a better buffer overall. But this class focuses more on combat, so that really isn't too much of an issue. And for her other notable moves, she gets Freya. Now, this is actually a pretty strong move. I think she makes like a chariot that like runs over enemies and it also shrinks them. Now, normally I'd say shrinking enemies is bad because when you shrink an enemy in this game, it reduces the experience that you receive from them to 1, which I think is kind of bad. But if you can't handle an enemy, you should probably use this move. Or if you want to do a lot of damage to your enemies or opponents, I could recommend using Freya. It's really strong, so I'd recommend using it. Now for like abilities, she gets access to attack boost all. This basically just increases your whole entire team's attack when the battle starts. It's really good. She will later get access to defense boost and magic boost all. Now that's when she promotes to tier 4. This tier list isn't about tier 4, it's about tier 3, but that is something to keep in mind. So if you just want to use this class and see how they became in tier 4, they do get access to those skills eventually. But Starlancer actually gets access to those as soon as she promotes. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. For other abilities, she gets access to Oracle. This increases all stats when using the class strike. This is really, really good. She will be probably spamming Light Lance a lot because it's a really strong class strike. It has a lot of range. And when she uses any class strike, she'll just buff all of her stats or boost all of her stats. This makes her like a really good character to just take out multiple enemies. She is really, really aggressive, which is weird for a light path, but she does benefit from these buffs. She also gets access to Light of Guidance, which increases attack by 7% for all allies when HP is above 50%. This is similar to Attack Boost All. This class just focuses on attacking and buffing your allies every now and then, but primarily focuses on taking out enemies just by herself. And she also gets access to Extra Potent, which gives you a status buff when you buff an ally. So basically what this means is let's say you boost your ally's attack with Strengthen, you also get access to that buff, or you receive the increase from that buff also, which is really, really good. Just overall, this character is just really, really strong and aggressive. It's in B tier because it's outclassed by Starlancer, but its combat's really good. I'd recommend using this class if you just want a character that can kind of like switch between attacking and also supporting your allies. It is pretty good. It's not broken, but that's why it's in B tier. Next is Dragon Master, and this is Reese's Darklight Path. This class is very similar to Venatus, but instead of focusing on buffing allies, this class focuses on debuffing enemies, so it's really good. For locked abilities, this class gets Wing Protection, which increases attack by 20% when HP is full. This is really good. Basically, if you take no damage, you're dealing more damage. And it's also easy to get back. So if you take a hit or whatever, you can just heal your HP back and you already have this activated. So it's really good. For class strike, she gets Aerial Lance and Dragon Ren. Aerial Lance is a really good class strike. It's a level 2 and it hits multiple enemies. I think they like jump on the staff and it like bounces on some of the enemies. It's really, really good. And Dragon Ren is a really good level 3 class strike. You make like 3 dragons and it hits multiple enemies. They're huge and they do a lot of damage, so that's a really good class strike. This class also gets access to all the debuff skills. So Venatus and Starlancer get access to like Strengthen and Protection. This one gets access to like Weaken. I think it's like Mental Boost Down or something like that. I can't think of the skills, but basically this class is really good if you want to just take out enemies who are doing too much, or you want to weaken them. This class is really good, and this class also has really good combat. Now the only problem with this class when it comes to debuffing is that Ephemeral Knight outclasses it. Similar to how Starlancer outclasses Venatus, Ephemeral Knight gets access to all the plus versions, but this one has better combat, so it's really up to personal preference, but I think Dragon Master is just not as good as Ephemeral Knight overall. Now for their other move, they get the I think it's pronounced Jormungandr. I hope that's right. Basically, they make like this huge snake and it spits out poison. It does a lot of damage and it poisons enemies. It's really, really strong. It's really good for taking out a lot of enemies, especially if they're too strong for your team. You can just poison them and slowly weaken them, which is really, really good for this class. And then for like abilities, this class gets Charger, which increases attack damage by 75% when using a charge attack. This is really good. Basically, if you use a charge attack, which you will with this class, you're doing 75% more damage. This class also gets Super Stat Down. This increases the effectiveness of stat decrease by 7%. This is really, really good. Basically, if you do a debuff on a character or an enemy, the debuff will be more effective than it will normally. So that's really, really good for this class. And then for the other notable ability that they have Summon CS and Stat Down CS Boost. They add 15% and 25% respectively. Basically, this class has one summon, so that's 15% added to class strike when you use it, which is pretty good. And then for Stat Down CS Boost, basically if you use a Stat Down move or a debuff move, you get 25% added to your CS gauge, which is really, really good for this class. Overall, this class is really good when it comes to combat and debuffing enemies. It's very similar to Venatus, which is why I place it higher, but I don't think it's as good as Ephemeral Knight, which is just a overall better class. But this class is really, really good. I'd recommend using it if you want a more offensive approach when compared to Venatus. But overall, this class is good. That's why it's in B tier. Starting off A tier, we have Divine Fist, and this is Kevin's Light path. This path only focuses on healing allies and using the CS gauge, which is really interesting. Now, if you want to use this class to its full potential, if you get all of the cactus or little cactus, you get this thing called the Cactus Soul and the Cactus Ring. And basically what those do is the Cactus Ring gives you 1% CS gauge for every step you take, which is broken. And then the Cactus Ring, I'm pretty sure, or Cactus Soul ability, it gives you, I think, 200% added to your CS gauge when you enter battle. So this class would really benefit from having that, or a lot of characters benefit from having that, but this character really likes to use his class strike a lot. But let's start off with his locked abilities. He gets Indignant, which increases attack if an ally faints. If an ally dies, you get stronger. He also gets Fighting Spirit, which adds 4% of CS gauge for every 5 seconds in battle. This is pretty broken, and this is going to start to show when we get to his class strikes just how much he just loves using his moves, because he's a really strong character and he focuses only on that. For class strikes, he gets Spin Kick. Spin Kick is really, really broken. I mentioned it earlier. It's a huge tornado, hits multiple enemies, and it does a lot of damage. But this one has this class has a very interesting level 3 class strike. It's called Byakuya Wave, and basically he does like a Kamehameha. Now it takes a minute for him to actually like charge it, but while he does it, he's invincible. But basically he makes like this huge like ball, and then when he throws it at the enemies, and it does like a ludicrous amount of damage. It's ridiculous because he can spam it too, especially with the Cactus Soul. It does a lot of damage. It has like a huge explosion. The only problem with it is that it can miss sometimes, but if you hit something like one enemy, all the enemies around them are going to die, and it's really, really good. He just focuses on spamming this move so much. It was really broken in the original too, but this class really benefits from having just those class strike items on him. He also gets access to Pressure Point. This is one of his moves. Basically, this helps him increase his attack. This class is a light path, so it's a little bit less attack than Kevin's other paths, but it still has a lot of attack. This basically just helps make sure that he does enough damage in combat, which is really good. He also gets access to Nature Aura. This helps him increase CS gain in battle. He can also use this on an ally, but since this class focuses so much using class strike, you probably just want to use it on him. And then for like abilities, he gets one hit class strike, which increases class strike by 25% when the HP is full. This is really good. I mentioned it earlier, like class just wants to use as many class strikes as he possibly can, and he wants to spam them as much as possible, because basically if you use a class strike or level 3 Byakuya Wave, you're most likely going to have another one within a few seconds, which is really good. He also gets Meditation, which adds 7% to CS gauge for every 5 seconds in battle. This is basically the same as I mentioned earlier. He just gets more. It's similar to Fighting Spirit. So that means he gets 11% every 5 seconds to his CS gauge, which is really, really good, and it starts to stack up over time. He also gets Stat Boost CS. Basically, if he uses a Stat Boost move like Nature Aura, he's adding more to his CS gauge. And then for other abilities, he gets access to Broken Lines. All of Kevin's classes get this, but basically, you have a 60% chance of decreasing the enemy's defense when you hit them with a critical. That means he's going to be doing more damage if he inflicts a critical or hits his opponents with a critical, which is pretty good. And he also gets Revive, which has a 50% chance of reducing total amount of CS gauge when using a class strike by 50%. So basically, you have a 50% chance of reducing the amount of your class strike by 50%. So, for example, Byakuya Wave, that's 300 for your CS gauge that you need. It has a 50% chance, and if it activates, that means you're only using 150% of your CS gauge instead of 300, which means he has another Byakuya Wave ready. That's really, really good. This class just loves spamming that class strike. It's really, really good. It's the only class in the game that focuses on spamming class strikes, and I'd really recommend it if you just want to like go nuclear, because he can just hit so many enemies at once. He's not like A plus or S tier. I don't think he's necessarily broken, but since he's an A tier because he's just such a solid character and he can really just fit on any team. Next we have Ephemeral Knight, and this is Reese's Dark Path. This class is really good. It's basically the opposite of Star Lancer. This class specializes in debuffing multiple enemies instead of buffing multiple allies, which makes it really good in combat. Now for locked abilities, this class has Ward Runes and Persistent Effect. Basically these two skills just make sure that debuffs stay permanent on enemies during battle. In the original, when you debuff an enemy, the debuffs or buffs would stay on them no matter what. But for some reason in the remake, they can kind of disappear every now and then. So this makes sure that that will not happen, which makes it a pretty good locked ability. Now for moves or class strikes, this class gets Aerial Lance and Raging Fury. Aerial Lance is the same as Dragon Master. You like jump on your lance and you hit multiple enemies. It's really, really strong. And then for her level 3 class strike, Raging Fury, it's a very strong single hit class strike. It stuns one enemy, deals a lot of damage. It's really good for bosses. Now for moves, this class has access to all the debuff plus skills. So Enfeeble plus, Defenseless plus, Weaken plus. This allows her to debuff multiple enemies at once, which I think overall makes her a better unit than Dragon Master. Dragon Master can only debuff one enemy at a time, which is kind of like, I mean, that's good. You can debuff an enemy, but sometimes there's just be too many enemies on screen. You kind of want to balance it out. This class can just instantly do that. So if they're doing too much damage or doing too much of anything, you can just lower the stats, and then that would make your team work or your team more effective overall. And then for her other moves, she gets access to Hexes. Now, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but all of Reese's classes get access to like one strong summon. So you have Freya for Venatus, you have Jormungandr for Dragon Master. I think Star Lancer gets, I can't think of it off the top of my head. But this one gets Hexes, which is basically like a snake woman or whatever. It has like 4 or 6 arms. It does a lot of damage. I think this might be the strongest one out of all of her classes. I want to say it does 570 damage. That's off the top of my head, but it's really strong. It does a lot of damage. It doesn't have any added effect, but that's probably why it's the strongest one out of all of her classes. And then for like moves and abilities, this class doesn't have a lot of notable abilities really. That's probably the only thing that's keeping it from like A plus or S tier. But she only gets Super Stat Down, which is the most notable skill that I listed on here. I'm just looking through my notes. She gets Super Stat Down, which increases the stat decrease on enemies when you debuff them. I think Dragon Master also gets this, but basically your debuffs are more effective than they'd normally be. And overall, this class is just really, really good. Definitely better than Dragon Master. I know I keep on comparing the two, but Dragon Master is like only good for combat sort of and debuffing enemies. You can kind of like go switch between the two, debuffing and supporting your allies or lowering your enemy stats. But this one, since you can just debuff all your enemy stats within a matter of seconds, I mean, there really is no competition. Dragon Master has slightly better combat, but this class just really excels when it comes to just taking out multiple enemies at once. It's a really good class if you want to play aggressively or a good support character that acts aggressively also. I'd recommend using this class. Next is High Cleric, and this is Charlotte's Flightlight Path. This class is outclassed by Sage in every single way, but it's really good because of its healing. Its healing is basically broken. For locked abilities, this class has access to Mercy, which adds 10% to CS gauge when healing. I'm pretty sure all of Charlotte's class gets this. And then she also gets access to Security, which has a 10% chance of nullifying any damage. So this is actually kind of good. It's not guaranteed, but basically every now and then, if there's a strong attack or strong move that might kill you or do a lot of damage, this might activate. It's no guarantee, so it's a good skill to have on her. It's just not too reliable. Then for class strike, she gets Chop Slap as her level 3. I'm pretty sure she brings out like a huge fan and slaps the enemy multiple times. It's really strong. It's a single hit, and it does a lot of damage to single hits enemies or bosses, so it's really good for stacking up damage. And now for like skills and abilities, she gets access to Attack Saber. Now this is a really good skill. Basically, it increases your MP costs by 8 for Saber skills, but it also increases your attack by 25%. You will have so much MP near the end of the game or when you promote that this will never be an issue. So basically it's just an attack increase when you have this skill equipped. She also gets access to Recover Break or Recovery Break. This is one of probably the most broken personal skill in the game, maybe. Sage also gets this, but basically this allows you to recover 30% more than your actual HP threshold. So that means you can recover up to 130% of your HP. Now this is really good in hard mode, and this is why I put her in A tier. In hard mode, there are so many enemies with insta-kill moves. Like, it is absolutely ridiculous. So many bosses have that. To be able to heal above your actual HP or the HP requirement that you have and survive those hits is really good. Basically makes you not invincible, but you can literally just heal with this character and you'll never have to worry about dying, which is really good. Unless the character has like a broken insta-kill move. But you will most likely live pretty much every hit and you don't have to ever worry about dying, which is really good for a lot of characters. This makes her pretty much the ultimate like support character, because she also has access to Healing Light Plus and Twinkle Rain Plus, which means that pretty much your team is staying healthy throughout any battle, which is really good for this class. Now, the reason why she's still in A tier, not A plus or S tier, her combat really isn't that good, and she gets a lot of skills that really aren't too good or too notable in particular. Like she gets like, I think it's, this class also gets Holy Saber, I want to say. I think it gets Holy Saber, and I think it's called Undead Away. Those skills aren't really too good. Holy Saber is really good near the end of the game, but you'll be doing so much damage to enemies that it's really not, there's no point in really having it. And then Undead Away is kind of like Annihilate, but it's for undead enemies, which you really won't, well, you'll come across it for her path since each character has their own path, but it really isn't a good skill to have. Now for abilities, this class gets access to attack recoil. All Charlotte's class get this. Now there's a large debate that Charlotte has like low attack. People don't know if she has low attack or high attack. I think her attack is pretty solid overall. The attack recoil basically allows her to knock down enemies more often, or is pretty much guaranteed. She has like this butt slap move or whatever, where she like tackles the opponent or something like that, and it has a very high chance of knocking them over. And when you knock over an enemy, you can basically just spam attacking them and they will not be able to hurt you, which is really good. So I always had the skill equipped on her. She also gets access to heal CS boost, which is pretty good. Just adds 7% to CS gauge when you heal. It's good to have. She has Cure, which cancels out status effects when healing. She has Twinkle Rain Plus, so you really don't need this, but that's good to have. She also gets Sturdy. This increases attack by HP when or attack when HP is above 80%. This is good to have, and it's basically guaranteed because your HP will always be above 80% since her healing is really broken. And then for like other moves, she gets access to Heal Upgrade All, which heals 10% more to allies in battle. And just overall, this character is just very good when it comes to healing. Healing is just really good in this game. Charlotte was not this good in the original, or High Cleric was not this good in the original. Just having that healing capability just automatically put her in A tier. Now, she's not A plus or S tier because her combat really isn't notable. Yeah, she gets access to a lot of skills and a lot of support, but like, why would you use this class when you have Sage? Sage is literally better in every single way. Like, there's really no reason to use this class, but this class is still good to have. Slightly more power, but overall, Sage is just a much better class. This class is good overall, and if you want to use it or just want to see how good healing is in this game, I definitely recommend trying out this class. And for the last class in A tier, we have Enlighten, and this is Kevin's Dark-like path. This class isn't as strong as Fatal Fist, but it is still pretty good. It's his Dark-like path. Focuses a little bit more on supporting allies, but don't underestimate its power. It still is really strong. For locked abilities, this class gets Inferno, which grants invincibility for 10 seconds at the start of battle. I don't think I need to explain why that's broken. He gets 10 seconds of invincibility when the battle starts, so you can basically just go crazy with this class when the battle starts. Now for like class strikes, he gets Abyssal Slice. This is really good. Single hit class strike is level 2. It deals a ton of damage. It's really strong. It's one of my favorite class strikes. It's really good to have on this class, but his level 3 is where he really shines. He gets access to Suzaku Aerial. I think I pronounced that right, yeah. In the original, this was probably tied with like Split Slash for being the most broken class strike in the game. Or, yeah, class strike in the original. Because basically you could not dodge it, and it just did too much damage. It did like 300 damage base. In this game, he basically like jumps in the middle. He does like, he puts his arms out, and he makes like this huge field of fire, and it does just crazy amounts of damage. It's pretty much the same as Seer Strike, but that's what Fatal Fist gets, but this covers a large area, and it will kill a lot of enemies. It's just ridiculous how strong this class strike is. And now for moves, he gets access to Moon Saber. Now this is pretty much the only move that he gets. Basically, Moon Saber allows him or his moves to absorb HP when fighting an enemy. This is pretty good. This is kind of like when I mentioned he's a little bit more supportive than Fatal Fist or any of the other Kevin's Dark Paths, but it is still pretty good to have. And then for like abilities, he gets access to stat down resistance. This is sort of niche, but it cancels out all stat decreases. So he'll be doing so much damage that you'll never even notice if you're debuffed. This class is just that strong. And I know I said he's weaker than Fatal Fist, but I mean, the gap really isn't that big. He still is ridiculously strong, especially thanks to being able to have access to the werewolf form. This class can just go crazy when it comes to attacking enemies. And then for his other ability, he gets access to Broken Lines. All Kevin's classes get this, but you get a 60% chance of decreasing the enemy's defense when they're hit with a critical. So basically, if you hit them with a critical, you're doing more damage, which is pretty good. He also gets access to attack recoil, similar to High Cleric. This makes it easier for him to knock down enemies. This is pretty good because if you knock down enemies, they can't attack you, which means basically you can just kill them without even having to worry about that. But since this class gets invincibility when the battle starts, I mean, he really doesn't even have to worry about that. He also gets victory CS boost. If he wins a battle or knocks out an enemy, he gets 7% added CS gauge. This is pretty good. Now, for the most part, this class is pretty much identical to Fatal Fist, just slightly more, slightly weaker, a little bit more niche, but it still is pretty good. I mean, he is just ridiculously strong. Don't sleep on Kevin's attack power, especially his dark paths. He's just a really strong class overall. He's an A tier. He just barely missed the cut for A+, but overall, this class is really strong. Alright, starting off A+, we have Elder Fray, and this is Duran's Dark-like path. This class is really solid overall. It pretty much defines the tier. I was debating on putting it in A tier, but overall this class is really strong, and I just had to put it in A+. This class specializes in dealing with multiple enemies and buffing multiple allies at once. For locked abilities, this class gets Indomitable, which increases attack by 10% for 10 seconds when the battle starts. So basically, when the battle starts, you get a 10% strength increase or attack increase. This is pretty good to have. He also has Mastery, which increases weapon efficiency by 15%. Now, the game doesn't explain what weapon efficiency is, but I'm pretty sure that just increases his attack power by 15%. I'm not too sure, but it is good to have with this character. Now, for like class strikes, he gets Spin Slash and Hollow Slash. Spin Slash is a pretty broken class strike. It's the same as Duelist. You make one huge tornado, deals lots of damage to multiple enemies. It's really strong. Before his level 3, he gets Hollow Slash. With this class strike, he makes like these small like gale things, and he kind of like just throws them at his opponent. He'll start swinging his sword like really fast, but it is really strong. It hits multiple enemies and it does lots of damage, so it's good to have. And then another thing this class gets, he also gets access to all the Saber Plus skills. This makes him a really good boss killer, or a really good support character for boss killers, because he's able to change his element whenever he's fighting a specific enemy. This allows him to do more effective damage and makes him a stronger character overall, so this is pretty good to have. Now for like abilities and stuff like that, he gets access to offensive and defensive stance. Now, I personally don't like these skills because they're kind of like double-edged swords. One is good for offense, one is good for defense, but you're sacrificing the other stat. So I really just prefer to just play with just normal abilities on this character. But these two skills are good to have on this character if you want to do, or if you want to change your playstyle. He also gets access to Attack Saber. Now, this gives him a 25% damage increase for the cost of more MP for Saber skills. I think it's like 8 more MP, but basically I mentioned this earlier, but you will have so much MP when you promote or by the end of the game that this will never be an issue. So it's basically a 25% damage increase. It is good to have on this character. And he also gets access to Weak Point All, which basically ensures that more enemies will take more effective damage. This is pretty good for him. He will be dealing a lot of effective damage because he has those Saber skills, and overall this class is really strong. And then for like his last two notable abilities that I found this character, he has access to Fraction. This is the same as Duelist. Duelist also has this, but basically you get a 150% damage increase to enemies with moderate resistance. If you don't know what that means, that basically means like any enemy that's not taking any effective damage or has like no elemental weakness, you're dealing 150% more damage to them, which is pretty crazy. And he also gets Concentrate, which basically is the same as Pinpoint, just increases his chance of critical by 25%. So overall, this class is just really strong. He is an A+ tier because he can deal with multiple enemies. He can buff his allies. He really is a strong class. He doesn't even have any like notable flaws. Only flaw I'd say is like sometimes his damage output isn't high, but overall this class is really strong, and that's why it's an A+ tier. Alright, now we're at Grand Diviner, and this is Angela's Light path. This class is an S tier, but it's still pretty good. If you want my definition of S tier, that character has to have really good combat, really good support, not any notable flaws, pretty much good in every single way. This class is really good. I'd say her combat is probably broken, but she doesn't really provide anything unique for her teams or whatever team you have her on. But her damage output and her combat is really good. The only thing that's stopping her is that, well, it's Angela, and Angela has the lowest physical stats in the game. Like her attack and defense are the lowest, and she can die really easily to a lot of enemies, so you just have to be careful with this class. But overall, this class is really strong. And another controversial thing that people probably think about this class is that it's better than Magus. Now, I personally think that Magus and Grand Diviner are basically the same. I think Grand Diviner is easier to use, but Magus is better overall. These two classes are basically identical because of their high attack power. That's literally why Angela's like first two classes that are on this list. I put them so low because their damage output was so low. But Grand Diviner and Magus have really high attack power, and you just cannot underestimate how good these characters are. So now we're gonna get into the good stuff with this character. She doesn't really have any good class strikes. She has Love Typhoon, which is kind of weak, but her most notable class strike is probably Boomerang Spiral. It's just a ridiculous class strike. It's literally like watching a movie. She like throws throws like her staff, and then she like summons all these elements, and like the screen will literally turn into like it'll like literally flash with like thunder, lightning, fire, or just all these elements, and to just destroy the enemy. For locked ability, she gets Magic Burst, which increases magic damage by 15% when MP is full. If you give her the Obsidian Power Ring or Obsidian skill from the Black Rabbite, you will never have to run out of MP. You won't need to use any MP when you're in battle. So that basically makes her like the best magic user outside of Magus. She also gets access to all the elemental spells, so that makes her a really good boss killer. So if you want to do effective damage against a specific enemy, she can do that. She also has access to like skills and abilities like Limit Break. Limit Break is good because it increases her magic damage by 25% automatically. I'm pretty sure this is a personal skill, but it's good to have on this character. She also has Pinpoint, which has a 25% chance to increase like criticals on her magic attacks. This is pretty good. And then she also has Elemental Combo, which is a really good skill. Basically, this means that if you use the same element in succession, her damage output gets much higher. I did not list this for some reason. I'm looking through my notes, but she also gets I can't think of her elemental skill, but she has like this one skill. All of Angela's classes get like a specific magic move, and this move is really like she summons like all these elements. That class or that move is really broken because it's basically a guaranteed kill on like any enemy. I don't know why I didn't list it here on my notes, but overall this class is really strong. If you're probably looking at the footage, you're just seeing how much damage output like this character has. It is absolutely absurd. So it's not S tier. S tier is a little bit, she's just not, I don't think she's good enough to be in S tier. But don't underestimate this class. She's an A+ because she can literally fit on any team. She's really is strong. Probably Angela's best class overall. I think Magus is slightly better. I only put Magus one spot above this class, but overall this class is really strong. Next is Magus, and this is Angela's Dark Path. Now this class is very similar to Grand Diviner, but has far more attack power. The only problem with this class is that it sacrifices both MP and HP, so you have to be a little bit careful. Now for locked abilities, she has Wrath and Soul Hunt. Both of these basically just increase your magic stack so when your HP or ally faints. If an ally dies, it's easy to revive them, and they will die on hard mode, so these are good to have. Now for class strike, she has Hot Shot. This is a pretty powerful class strike. It mows down enemies with basically like all these fireballs. The only problem with this class strike is that the fireballs, it's like in a line. If they're not in front of you, or your enemies or opponents are not in front of you, you will miss and you won't do any damage. So it's kind of hard to use, but if you know how to use it, it's a good class strike. Now for this character, she also gets access to all the elemental spells in the plus versions. Now these are really good. Basically allows her to do effective damage against enemies and specific bosses. So these are good to have. But for her personal skill, this is probably like the most notable thing about this character. She gets access to Ancient Curse. Now this is probably the most broken personal move in the game. Basically, she makes like a huge meteor by sacrificing some of her HP, and it deals like literally too much damage to even like calculate. It does like, I want to say like 450 damage, but the thing about the skill is that it basically is an insta kill on anything that it touches. So if you want to just see how much magic attack this class has, just use this move and watch this character go nuclear. It is absolutely insane how much damage it does. Now for abilities, she gets Magic Recoil. Basically what this does is that it ensures that your magic attacks will knock down enemies. Angela has, or all of Angela's classes have such low attack power, like physically, and their defense is also pretty low, so they won't really be able to knock down enemies with their normal attacks. But with their magic moves, they can easily knock down more enemies, so this is good to have. She also has access to Wound and Wound Magic All. So basically what these skills do is that they sacrifice your HP for you and your allies respectively, but they allow you to do more damage. It is kind of hard to manage if you don't know what you're doing. If you spam all your magic moves, you will pretty much die by like sacrificing all your HP, which is kind of a double-edged sword, but your attack power will basically be absolutely like ballistic. You would just one-shot every single enemy. It is absolutely insane how strong this class is overall. Now that's probably the only problem with this class. You sacrifice your allies' HP, but you can obviously heal and restore your HP with healing items. This class overall is just really strong. It is absolutely nuclear. You can still die in 2 hits because it's Angela, but I love this class. It is just ridiculous how strong it is. That's why I place it so high on the tier list. But overall, this class is really strong. If you know how to use it, it is truly a really strong class. Easily Angela's best class by far. Next is Fatal Fist, and this is Kevin's Dark Path. This class has the highest damage output in the game when it comes to physical attacking power. He also focuses on critical hits and overwhelming enemies with combos. This is one of my favorite classes to talk about because he's just so strong. He has such high attack power, the highest in the game, and he just always knocks out an enemy whenever he needs to. Now for locked abilities, I don't think his locked abilities are too good. That's probably the only thing that's holding him back, but basically they rely on him having low HP to do more damage. Now in hard mode, you can actually kind of use this to your advantage. The lower your HP is, the more damage you'll deal, and the enemies on hard mode, they will do a lot more damage, so this is good to have. Now for moves, he only has one move, which is Moon Energy. Not a lot of characters get this, but basically this increases your chance of critical hits when you activate it. It's pretty good for this character. He also specializes in using critical hits, so this is good to have. And now for class strikes, he has Abyssal Slice and Seer Strike. Abyssal Slice is the same as what Enlightened gets, but it's like a combo. It's really strong level 2 class strike, and it stuns one enemy and one boss, or one enemy that you're fighting. So it's really good to have. It does a lot of damage. And his level 3 is Seer Strike. This is the same as Suzaku Aerial, but basically you make like a ring around you, and it does like tons of damage to multiple enemies. It's really strong. Now for like abilities and stuff like that, he has Finishing Blow. This basically does 30% more damage to enemies with lower HP. It's kind of overkill in my opinion, but it's still good to have. He also has Mute. This is pretty good. Basically what this does is when you hit an enemy with a power attack, there's a random chance that they will be silenced. And silence means that they cannot use any abilities or skills that they have. So this is really good to have with this character. He also stacks with Special Effect, which is one of his other abilities. But basically when a foe is hit with a status, you will be doing more damage to them overall. So this is really good because Mute just so happens, when you mute someone, it counts as a silence, which is like silence just means they can't use any moves. When you do this, that means that you'll be doing more damage to them overall, which is pretty good to have. This character just has so much attack that you'll just be doing so much damage. It's absolutely ridiculous how strong he is. And for his last notable ability, he has Broken Lines. All of Kevin's classes get this, but basically you do 60% chance of decreasing the enemy's defense when you hit them with a critical. He just so happens to specializes in hitting foes with critical, so this just adds to his high damage output overall. And this class is just so strong. He's ridiculously strong. Highest damage output in the game when it comes physically. He can just combo, destroy as many enemies as possible. He has a really good class strikes. I just love this class overall. If you want to see how much damage you can truly do in this game, outside of like Duelist, because Duelist has the second highest attack, I use this class. He's just absolutely insane, and he's definitely one of my favorite classes. Next is Nightblade, and this is Hawkeye's Dark Threat path. This class focuses on insta-killing enemies and has high offensive stats. I know a lot of people might be surprised by this placement, but this class is really good. He's the only character with very high physical and magical attack. This means that he is capable of inflicting large amounts of damage to multiple enemies with higher defenses. So if you're wondering, a lot of enemies in this game, especially on hard mode, have very high physical defense and magical defense. He can get around that because both his offensive stats are so high, so he'll never have a problem with taking them out. Now for locked abilities, he has Focus. This increases magic attack by 10% when the HP is full. Basically, if you don't get hit, your magical attack are doing more damage, so this is pretty good. And if you do get hit, you can just heal. And then for his other locked ability, he has Cutthroat. Now this is pretty crazy. Basically, he has a 10% chance of instantly destroying an enemy if they have a status effect per hit. The game doesn't tell you per hit, but basically, let's say an enemy has like Silence or Toxic or any status on them. Every time you hit them with any move, and since Hawkeye has multi-hit moves, there's a 10% chance on every hit that you inflict on them that they will instantly die. And this is really good, especially on hard mode, because there are a lot of enemies. This also breaks through like enemies with like high shields or whatever. He can insta-kill them just by touching them, or he can have a skill like Dark Rain that will just do it for him. So this is pretty good. This is on all of his moves, and he's the only character that has this. I was going to think about like compare this to Fatal Fist. Fatal Fist has to actively like knock out enemies, but he has high attack. This class can literally just touch an enemy and they will most likely die. And if you think like the 10% isn't a lot, it happens very frequently, especially on like Anissa Stake, but that's like post game. But it does happen a lot when you're playing through the game. Now for class strikes, of course he has Split Slash. That's probably his only notable one. This is pretty broken. It's not as broken as the original, and the original did like 700 damage, and they had to like nerf it because I mean it was just absolutely insane. It did too much damage, but it still does a lot of damage to multiple enemies. It's really good for breaking shields, and it hits multiple enemies. They just have to be in front of you when you do it. Now for moves, now this is probably what sets this class from Ninja Master. Now I know a lot of people might be saying like, what's the big difference between these two classes? Ninja Master hits multiple enemies at once, but Nightblade does more damage. It has more skills. Ninja Master only gets the plus versions of his skills, but this one gets a lot more skills. He gets Poison Cloud, Fire Cloud, Needle Shower, Weapon Smack, and Dark Rain. Those are the most notable ones, but he gets more. Basically, these moves are just how do you, they come down to like how do you want to take out your enemy. So for example, Poison Cloud, Fire Cloud, they just decrease your enemy's HP. Needle Shower can silence enemies, prevents them from using skills. Weapon Smack lowers the enemy's HP by half, which is pretty good. And then Dark Rain silences, and it also deals dark damage and hits multiple enemies at once. So this class really is very versatile. He's just so strong, and he just has literally the best offenses in the game. Pretty much, no class even comes close because he hits both physical and magical, which is really good. And to make him more offensive, he has very good abilities also. He gets Magic Death Down All, which lowers magical defense of all enemies when the battle starts. This is pretty good. Basically, when a battle starts, you lower the magical defense stats of all enemies that you're fighting. This makes him a pretty good support character, and since he has moves like Poison Cloud and Fire Cloud, this allows him to do more effective damage against enemies with lower magical defense stats. He also has Special Effect. This is pretty good. Basically, he does more effective damage against enemies with a status effect. He naturally has a skill Toxic, or Hawkeye has a skill Toxic naturally, but since Nightblade has so many ways of just inflicting status, like silencing them with Dark Rain, or burning them with Fire Cloud or Poison Cloud, this allows him to do more effective damage and help his allies out. He also has Chain Ninja and Weak Point. Now these are pretty good. Chain Ninja basically means more ninja skills you use in succession, like Water Diversion against like a specific boss or enemy. That means you're doing more effective damage overall, and I think it stacks up to 30%. He also has Weak Point. Now this is pretty good. Basically, he also does more effective damage against enemies with specific weaknesses. So if an enemy gets hit with Water Diversion and they're fire, he will do probably like ×2 more damage, which is pretty good. He also has one-hit CS boost. This is self-explanatory, but basically if he insta-kills an enemy, which he most likely will, he gets 30% added to his CS gauge, which is pretty good. This allows him to spam like Split Slash, which is pretty good class right. And he also has Ninja SP boost. This is pretty much the same, but basically if you use a ninja move, you get 5% added to your CS gauge every time you use a ninja move. So this is pretty good overall. And overall, this class is really strong. I know it's kind of weird that I place him so high, but I think he really is good. If you're looking at this tier list, you're probably noticing a pattern. If you played the original, basically top 4 characters are like for this game and the remake are basically the same as where they were in the original. And I really do like Nightblade. Now, if you don't like Nightblade, just use Ninja Master. Ninja Master is also good. He's much easier to use, kind of like Magus and Grand Diviner, but Nightblade is overall a much stronger class. Alright, now starting off S tier, we have Star Lancer. This is Reese's Light Dart Path. This class is pretty crazy. She's the only character with a plus version of any buffing skills. Basically, what this means is that she can buff an entire team within seconds. No other class comes close to doing this. I know people might compare to Venatus and say Venatus combat is better. This class just straight up outclasses Venatus. There's just no comparison. If you were to ever like compare the two classes, there's basically no reason to use Venatus because that class has to manually buff allies like one by one, when this class can just automatically buff an entire team like within seconds. So there's just no comparison. Now for locked abilities, she has access to Army of One. This grants 1% added to CS gauge per hit. Now normally when you hit an enemy in this game with any character, you already get percent added to your CS gauge, but she gets an extra percent added to hers because it's locked abilities. So this is pretty good. It also allows her to spam her class strikes more often. And then for her other locked abilities, she has Meteor Light. This makes buffs permanent for the party until the battle ends. So for some reason in this game, I don't know why, but when you buff or debuff an ally or an enemy, those buffs or debuffs can disappear for some reason. This did not happen in the original because this class was just buffed everyone in the original, but for some reason that can happen in this game. This locked ability makes sure that that will never happen, so you can just buff your allies and not have to worry about rebuffing them. So this is pretty good. Now for class strikes, she has Lance Surge and Meteor Thrust. Lance Surge are level 2. It's the same as Venatus, but basically you make like these projectiles from your lance. It's easy to miss, but I think it's a good class strike. Now for level 3, she has a Meteor Thrust. Now this one's pretty crazy. Basically, she combos one enemy like for a very long time, like 5 or 8 seconds. And what's so good about this class strike is that it does 2 notable things. 1, it lasts a very long time, and 2, when the move ends, the last hitbox can hit multiple enemies. So it's kind of like a multi-hit class strike. It's really strong, and pretty much whatever gets hit by the end will most likely die. So this is a pretty good class strike overall. I'd say it's probably like the strongest single hit class strike next to like Abyssal Slice. It has way more utility and it's really good. So I just recommend using it a lot. Now for moves, this class gets access to all the plus versions of all the buffing skills. So Strengthen Plus, Protection Plus, and Mental Boost Plus. These are all good to have. But for her personal moves, she has Seraph. Now I mentioned this earlier, all of Reese's classes have like a personal summon. Seraph is probably one of the stronger ones because it silences enemies and it's really strong. Basically she makes like this angel behind her and like the hurt box, or 2 notable things actually. When she summons, she is intangible or invincible, so she cannot get hit. And 2, when the hitbox activates, it hits multiple times and it silences multiple enemies. So it's really strong. I'd recommend using it a lot. Now for like abilities and skills, she has access to Attack Boost All, Defense Boost All, Magic Boost All, and Magic Defense Boost All. She is the only character that gets all those skills. A lot of the characters I mentioned earlier only had like maybe 1 or 2 of those skills. she has access to all those skills. So that means when a battle starts, she literally buffs your whole team's stats, like pretty much when a battle starts. And it's pretty insane because this allows her to stack up buffs with like all the skills that I mentioned earlier or the moves she has to her whole entire team. And when I say like she can literally buff an entire team within seconds, like I'm not joking. Like this class is pretty insane when it comes to like buffing allies and stuff like that. For other abilities, she has good luck. This has a 30% chance of a stat increase from a move increasing by 15%. Basically, this makes the stat increase more potent than it was originally, so this is pretty good to have. And she really doesn't have any other notable abilities because she focuses so much on buffing allies, but this class is really insane. I put in S tier for two notable reasons. Her combat is really strong. I said Venata's combat was a little bit better. Looking back at it, it's really not that big of a difference. All Venata's has is Light Lance. This class is much stronger overall. Just to be able to like buff your whole entire team, especially on a hard mode when the enemies can like one-shot you. It's very good to have on this character, and that's why I place this class in S tier. And for the last class on this list, we have Sage, and this is Charlotte's Light Dark Path. This is probably the best class in the game overall. She has really good combat, really good support, and it's very versatile in general. When I started making this tier list, I knew that Star Lancer was going to be S tier because her support's really good. But then I realized this class is also really good because her healing will pretty much ensure that your team takes pretty much no damage whenever she's on your party. This class is just absolutely insane. I had to put her in S tier, but overall, she just is a really strong class. For locked abilities, she has Mercy. This adds 10% to CS gauge when healing any ally. This is pretty good. This class has all the healing skills like Healing Light Plus and Twinkle Rain Plus, and you're going to be doing a lot of healing on hard mode. But pretty much if this character is on your team, no one's going to die anytime soon, and the fact that she gets 10% added to CS gauge is pretty good. For her class strike, she gets Curseplode. Her level 2 class strike is pretty good, but her level 3 is probably where she shines the most. Curseplode is just absolutely broken because it does a ridiculous amount of damage to bosses and will pretty much one-shot all enemies. If you play with this class and use Curseplode, anything in front of you will most likely die. And it also fixes her issue of low damage output. A lot of people debate whether or not Charlotte has low attack. Her attack isn't low in my opinion. I just think you just have to work around it with some of her moves. But with this class strike, she just don't have... her combat just gets fixed entirely. So this is pretty good. Now for moves, she has Healing Light Plus and Twinkle Rain Plus. This is pretty good because basically you will ensure that your allies will never get hurt. All of Charlotte's classes have this, but this pretty much makes her the best support character in the game. Also, they cause 4 and 5 NP respectively, which is absolutely nothing because this class has like so much NP, especially near the end of the game. And for her other moves, she has access to all the Saber Plus skills. Now, this is like pretty crazy. Only other character that gets this is like Elderfray. But basically, this means that let's say you're fighting like a ice enemy or a fire enemy, or you just need a specific element to do effective damage. She can just give that element to her entire team so they can all do effective damage. So this is pretty good. It's really good for bosses too, because if you want to do more damage to them, you just activate these skills and they literally take like 2 seconds to activate. It's pretty much a free attack increase. For other abilities, she has Attack Boost All and Defense Boost All. This pretty much just buffs your allies when the battle starts. They're pretty good to have on your character. She also gets Recover Break. Now this is probably like the most broken personal skill in the game. Basically, this is the same as what High Cleric gets, but you heal allies 30% more than max HP. This is pretty insane on hard mode because there are a lot of enemies with like insta-kill moves, but this pretty much allows you to live those attacks and pretty much never die. It is absolutely insane how quick it activates, and it is, if you ever get hit like or take any damage, you can just heal your allies again. So it's really good to have on this character. She also gets Heal Upgrade All. This heals 10% more of allies HP in battle. This is pretty much overkill. Her healing is just absolutely insane. Like especially on hard mode, you'll be healing so much, or whenever you take any damage at all, like you just heal your allies and you just never have any damage on them. It's pretty much insane. And for her last ability, she has Cure. This has a 75% chance to cancel out status effects when healing it, or when using healing magic. This is pretty good. Basically, if you heal an ally, you have a chance of like canceling out any status. But she has Twinkle Rain Plus, so that'll never be an issue. And overall, this class is just absolutely insane when it comes to support. I know I was ranking characters on their combat, but this class has pretty much everything. She has good combat, good support, is like extremely versatile. I know I listed a lot of characters low on this tier list, like Grand Diviner or Magus. They probably could have been like S tier. Their combat's S tier, but they don't provide any support for their allies. This class pretty much is like the best overall class in the game. You just have so much utility and so much like there's just so much you can do with this class. It's absolutely insane. And if you want to see for yourself, I just recommend playing with this class. Thank you guys for watching this video. It took me a very long time to make this tier list. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make, just let me know or message me. I'm always welcome to feedback. I think this tier list is pretty good for the most part. Might have a few errors, but overall I think it's pretty good. This video was supposed to come out like 2 weeks ago, and it's like extremely long, so I'll probably make like timestamps for some of the characters and some of the placements. But yeah, I really appreciate if you guys like and subscribe, and stay safe.